your friends, family, work colleagues tell you to pick a side, hey, you gotta pick a side. You're either for us or against us about anything. It just so happens that it's Super Bowl weekend here in the United States. It could be pick a team, pick a Super Bowl team, right? You gotta pick a side. Pick a political party, pick a politician, pick an issue, pick something to march for or march against. You gotta pick a side. If that has been bothering you, if that's been annoying to you, if it's kept you in an emotional upheaval, you're not going to want to miss this video. I am calling this Living in the Gray Area, all about spiritual maturity. Hi, my name is Michelle Fondin. I'm the author of 12 published books, including The 8 Limbs of Yoga for Modern Times, a practical guide to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. If you're a yoga teacher, run a yoga teacher training program. This year, 2026, I'm offering free webinars on the 8 Limbs of Yoga for Modern Times for yoga teacher training programs. You can contact me at my email below. If you're new to this channel, welcome. Thank you for subscribing below. Click on the bell, scroll up to all for all notifications. Thank you for giving the video a thumbs up. I do tarot readings, and guess what? On February 16th, I'm doing a free Zoom webinar so that you can find out more and ask your questions about my meditation course. Yoga, spiritual awakening, all of that requires meditation to make it smooth sailing. So if you've been meaning to learn to meditate, but you're really not sure how, come to my info session. The link is below to join. So let's get ready to discuss this topic on picking sides. You must pick a side. What this is in reality is this is about duality. Duality is just a fancy word, right? A fancy spiritual word to talk about the dichotomy of earth living. This is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, this is black, this is white, this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing, right? That is duality. Spirituality, when you learn to widen your perspective, and in fact, that's what a spiritual awakening is all about. It's about widening the perspective. So when you're a newborn baby, you're wide open already. You're already wide open. That's why babies are so attractive, right? Sometimes if they're wrinkly and newborn, they might not look so attractive, but their energy is attractive. People want to go toward them and pinch their little cheeks. It's because their energy is wide open. They're open and receptive. They're so linked to source energy that we can learn so much from babies and toddlers. But then as we grow up, we go from this wide open vision to this narrow little tunnel. And that's how we live our lives, is in this narrow tunnel. And we become miserable so much of the time, right? And a lot of this sense of being miserable is because of this black or white scheming that happens in life. You have this tribal thinking, you have this mob mentality thinking that you want to fit in with your group, with your peer group even, and they're asking you to pick sides, right? You have to pick your issue. You have to pick your poison, so to speak. As you awaken, you learn that life truly is about living in the gray area. The gray area between black and white, the gray area between good and bad, good and evil even, right? Right and wrong even. Living in the gray area is spiritual maturity. I'm going to say that again so you grasp it. Living in the gray area is spiritual maturity. And it is because everything is relative. Everything is relative. Now, that does not mean that you can't make choices in life, but it does mean that there are no absolutes. So even if you make a choice today or pick a side today, tomorrow you have the free will choice to change your mind. And that is what living in the gray area is all about. It's about getting curious instead of making judgments, right? When we make a judgment, we make a decision on something, but then we disregard everything else. And spiritual maturity, so as you widen that tunnel, right, again to the funnel, and I'd like to say even wider open than the funnel, right? You have a very wide corridor of infinite possibilities coming your way when you are spiritually mature, when you are awakening, when you are having the realization that life is in the gray area. It's not in the extremes. So when you realize you have infinite choices, you get really curious about everything. And you have this spiritual wherewithal, you have this spiritual maturity to say, I don't really need to pick a side, right? I don't really need to. If I don't want to, I don't need to. And here's a really good phrase that you can say that's going to baffle your family, friends, and colleagues, right? It's going to baffle them. They're going to think you've gone way off the deep end. But you can say, I'm exploring living in the gray area. Just say that to them. I'm exploring living in the gray area. So if they say to you, hey, what team are you rooting for in the Super Bowl? You can say, well, I'm kind of exploring living in the gray area right now. I don't really need to pick a team, right? So let's suppose in that example, you don't pick a team, and instead, if you're into football, which I'm not into football, I'm more into the musicians at halftime. But if you're into football, you can just, and that would be American football in this case, right? Not European or South American football. So you would say, well, maybe living in the gray area means I look for the really good players on both teams, and I'm looking for the good plays. That's what I'm looking at during this game. So I'm celebrating the really good plays and the very skillful playing, because then you can look for the beauty in the game rather than letting your emotions go high, low, high, low, high, low, high, 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 low, 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 because you're rooting for a specific team. And when they do well, you're high. And when they don't do well, you're low, right? And that's how most of us really live. We live in the dichotomy of duality. And so our emotions are literally all over the place all the time. We're up, we're down, we're high, we're low. And everyone thrives on this drama of the emotional turmoil of dualism. And they think that that is life. Well, it is life, but it's not a very even-keeled or tranquil life. Right? In my Michelle Fondin author vlog, number 31, that I posted earlier this week, if you are viewing this on February 6th of 2026, I told a story that my mentor, Dr. Deepak Chopra, told that is an ancient Vedic saying or story that goes something like this. Life is the river between the banks of pain and pleasure, and as that river flows forward, you will bump into both sides, pain and pleasure. But the idea is to not get stuck on one side for too long. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, oh, I would really like to get stuck on the pleasure train, right? I'd like to get stuck on the bank of pleasure for sure. That would be amazing. Well, I'm going to give you a couple of examples in that. Have you ever been to a really good buffet? So my son's favorite buffet is Fogo de Chao, where he loves meat. I don't eat meat. He loves meat. So on his birthday, we go to Fogo de Chao, which is a Brazilian steakhouse here in the US. And you get to eat everything you want. There's a salad bar with salads and soups and breads, and you can eat anything you want. So if you've ever gone to a buffet where you are so hungry and you've been looking forward to this buffet, this great food, and you start eating the food and it's so pleasurable, right? It's so good. And they bring you these little cheese breads. I can't remember what they're called now. And they bring you this fried polenta, and they bring you mashed potatoes, and they bring you all this great stuff, and you're just eating it. And it's so incredibly good. But then after a while, if you keep indulging, you are going to experience pain, right? You're going to have a stomach ache. You might not feel so good. You may need to run to the bathroom because too much of a good thing is not pleasurable. It's painful. The same goes for an addiction, right? So if you are addicted to food, drugs, or alcohol, as an example, it might feel pleasurable. You might bump into that bank of pleasure, but then pretty soon after that, it's going to feel very painful when you're depleted of your money, resources, and health, for example. And so that Vedic saying of life flowing on the river between the banks of pleasure and pain, the idea you will bump into both sides, but not stay at either side for too long, that is the goal. And really, that is living in the gray area. It's about understanding that life is not necessarily about picking a side because everything is relative. Many, many, many people are under the false assumption that if only we could eradicate this or that, life would be so much better. If only this person would rise to power and this person would fall from power, life would be so much better. If only there was no homelessness or no poverty or no hunger or no whatever it happens to be, life would be so much better. But we really need to understand that everything is relative. And I'm not putting forth the idea that poverty is good, for example. However, if you are into spirituality, right? If you're into spiritual teachings, you know that perhaps the call for poverty or homelessness or hunger would mean that those that are not hungry and not homeless and not in poverty, that they wouldn't have that rising feeling up in them to assist, to help, to love more, right? So you don't know what that person's dharma is, life purpose, why they came here, if they are homeless or hungry or in poverty. You don't know what they asked for when they came here, but maybe they asked so that someone else could have the courage, the compassion, the love to serve, right? We don't know that. And so when we live in the gray area, we question more. We get more curious. We're more open-minded to both sides, right? The pain and the pleasure. We're open to both sides, the good and the bad. We're open to both sides, the right and the wrong. We're open to both sides. And we understand that life is a flow, right? We understand that life just flows and that there are no absolutes. In my vlog, I also told a story. I'm not going to retell it here, but go ahead and view that video. I'll post it here after this video, but it's a Zen Buddhist story. I can say with absolute certainty right now that if you have been living on an emotional roller coaster because your life is designed around people, situations, circumstances, your tribe, your family, your work environment, what have you, if your emotional ups and downs, if your emotional roller coaster has been dependent on the fact that people are asking you on a constant basis to agree with them, or to pick a side, or to choose, or to march for this or march against this, and it's causing you to have that emotional roller coaster ride on the day-to-day where you just feel like, I don't feel like I can do anything right, because if I choose this side, then the people over here will be unhappy. If I choose this side, the people over here will be unhappy. I just don't know what to do because I want to choose this, for example, right? I would say try living in the gray area for a week, for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, and see what happens. The world is not going to come crumbling down because you're living in the gray area. I've been doing this for years and years and years. And believe me, that does not mean that I'm not feeling the pressure that comes in, notably from my family, right? It might not be people on the exterior. It might not be my friends, but certainly from my family. When voting time comes around, when certain issues come about, when certain economic circumstances arise in the global scale, of course I hear things, right? You need to be like this, or vote for this, or do this, right? Or boycott this. So believe me, I hear it. But I've chosen to live my life in the gray area and to not be swayed, because I know that we do not know enough to know the entirety of the story. And that is spiritual maturity. It's being able to hold your own, being able to not be swayed or persuaded or bullied or manipulated into having to choose sides, to choose right or wrong, black or white, but embracing the gray area when you feel comfortable to do so, right? To say, I don't really have enough information, or I really don't know, but I am exploring living in the gray area for now, right? They're going to think you've gone off your rocker. They're not even going to understand what you mean. And that's okay. That's all you need to say. You don't have to justify yourself. So if they say to you, hey, are you going to vote tomorrow? You go, well, I'm kind of exploring living my life in the gray area. They're like, hey, are you going to join this march against cancer tomorrow? You can be like, you know what? I'm just exploring living my life in the gray area for now, right? They're like, which Super Bowl team are you picking? I'm just living my life in the gray area right now, right? I hope the best team wins. Well, which team is that? I don't know. We'll see, won't we? And it might frustrate other people, but that's okay. As long as you're not frustrated, as long as you are finding yourself again, being able to live on a more emotional, even keel without having those high highs and those low lows and being bounced up and down so much that you really don't know where you're at. Some people get caught up. I would say most people get caught up. If you're in a bar when one team loses the Super Bowl, you certainly know people have those emotional lows if their team is the losing team, right? And some people even destroy property. They go crazy. They get into fights. And it's all very silly, right? Because we all know that in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. We can have enjoyment without having to pick a side. We can have the most enjoyment out of living in the gray area. So I encourage you to try this on for size. You don't have to like it. Maybe you won't like it. Maybe you'll hate it. But that just might mean that you're not ready to embrace that type of relativity. And that's okay. But just notice your emotions in the coming week. Notice if your emotions are calmer if you decide to try this experiment of living in the gray area for a week. Notice if you're more like smooth, right? If your emotions are just more smooth, if you feel that they're a little more refined, that they're not so harsh, and you don't have a pit in your stomach a lot, right? You're just kind of like, oh, I'm kind of curious about that, right? And if you go into it with that mindset, then you'll see when you try it on for size if it's actually for you. So I invite you to do that. I want to thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of transcending duality. Thank you so much for subscribing, liking, giving the video a thumbs up, putting a comment in the comment section below, sharing this with others. Please do join me on February 16th at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time for a live info session about immersion into meditation, a mantra-based meditation technique. If it's right for you, the link is below. You do need to register for that one. Thank you for your support of my channel. You can purchase one of my 12 published books, join an online course, and I will see you in the next video.